Well, as usual, when we're at IBC, we're working, but we did pull up a few things there. It was really weird in Amsterdam, though. It was hotter than hell. I thought I'd go there to cool off.
It was hotter than
But you can see, and as you can see, the time on my on my thing there, it's always 4:20 when you're in Amsterdam. But with that, I'm going to just start with a little wrap-up video, given I don't have a bit of a voice here, and we'll go from here. Maybe something like that.
Hello again, Martin. Yes, a CTO session, the wrap-up session, has just finished, and a few of the speakers have dashed to the IP studio for us. Thanks very much for being here, John, Simon, and Tom. I know you said last night, John, that this was going to be a challenging session to get through everything. So how did it go?
Well, you're giving me another challenge to summarise it for you, aren't you? We've covered a lot of ground this morning. 90 minutes. We went from the consumer to professional production. One of the themes that came out, consumers have got more choice, they've got more options, and therefore it's consumers increasingly that are determining success or failure of some of the technology strategies here at IBC. The other thing that came out is it's not all about picture quality anymore. There's so much around data, analytics and so on that's important, which came up. We're in the IP studio here. Of course, that was a big subject. And this IP demonstration, I think, is seen as a major landmark in the development of IP in the production environment. So we definitely covered that. Means that interoperability between equipment is incredibly important, as it always has been. But I think the overriding theme I got was that we're in a period of experimentation. Nobody's got all the answers, so we need to be experimenting. We need to scale up what works well, turn off what doesn't work, because we've got to try many things, knowing that they're not all going to be winners.
Simon, what stood out for you in the session?
I think obviously the IP studio is a big part of it, but I think it's getting ready for the future and what the benefits will be, so we need to think beyond just connecting things together and think about what exciting things can we do with this technology in the future. I think we also spoke about personalisation and the importance of talking to the consumer or the viewer, if you like, but not at the exclusion of all interesting things. You know, so I think we touched on the area of broadcasting still being relevant. You know, it is still very relevant. People spend 3 hours, 40 minutes a day watching it, so live is a very key part of broadcast TV today, and I think that came home as well. Despite the complexity of the modern world we have today and the number of receivers that we have to watch content on, I think TV still remains a big part of it and actually delivers content online as well as on TV. So
one of the conclusions was that some of the viewing is additional to conventional TV rather than replacement.
And the plethora of devices we have today just makes it even harder to gain audience and gain attention. So we all have to work a lot harder, I'm afraid.
What do you think about that, Tom?
Yeah, I think that's right. We thought that there was such a plethora of subjects we could talk about. Actually, if you want to summarise that all, thinking about this kind of digital disruption, there's a whole range of opportunities out there, and we have existing business models that are very successful, and the real challenge is how do we take advantage of all this fabulous technology and the new opportunities to do business in new ways, both actually within the media creation process, but also the offerings out to the consumer and the viewer, and how do we really embrace that and take advantage of it, and at the same time as blending the best of what we have at the moment and the best of the new opportunities, also responding to the challenges where actually that may actually just...
Here. Anyway, close enough. So let me switch back to the PowerPoint here, and that gives you a short overview of what went on. But the main things we're going to talk about is what were the highlights, what were the trends, what were talked about, and kind of what caught people's eye. Paul will cover some of that. I think the main thing, as John Ide mentioned in the presentation there, it's a shift from picture quality, not meaning that picture quality is being degraded at all. It just means there's a shift in emphasis, whereas before we always focused on super picture quality, now we have to focus on super picture quality and a pile of other things. Certainly, it's everybody knows that it's a big revolution going beyond analog to digital, but it's also the business thing. And the business was talked about a lot in the sessions, and actually it was reasonably negative on that side. And I think some of the negativity came from the fact that, particularly in Europe, you have over 70 state broadcasters that go to this event. And they started to gang up saying, you know, Google's the enemy and things like that. But state broadcasters, typically in Europe, it's a little more difficult for them to change. So they've been struggling with that. So it's not as easy as it used to be. Certainly, UHD 4K was there, and a bigger focus on more things than just certainly pixels. And we'll get into some of those things when we get into it a little bit more. I think the two disruptors certainly are very consistent over the last couple of years, which are IT and IP. And the interrupt zone, I'll show you a couple of videos on that. That was a very important thing where there were over 30 suppliers that put together. And of course, a little bit about cloud and how cloud is getting there. Do you want to cover these, Paul?
Yeah, so, and as Stan mentioned, the European broadcast ecosystem is a little different from here. The state broadcasters are quite entrenched. Competition isn't the same here. So they're not viewing the threats, I think, as aggressively as some in North America are viewing them, but the threat is seen. One of the key trends is the changing consumption of video, how it's being consumed, both subscription VOD as well as regular VOD or unbundled services. With more choice, there's less dependence on traditional broadcast, and especially the millennials. And if anybody here has kids in their 20s, you know the deal. They don't watch TV by appointment. There's no fight at the top of the clock for who's watching what channel. In fact, very unlikely they'll turn the TV set on at all. Stan, do you want to pick up these points?
So I certainly had a chance to talk with a lot of different broadcasters, and again, they're struggling how to come up with new business ideas. One of the recommendations everybody's been giving is to carve out a certain amount of budget just to play with IP, but also try different business models. And I think that's important. If they don't have that in the budgets, they don't know where to go. So it's a matter of understanding that. Part of the discussion as well came up with, you know, it's all about the consumer's eyeballs and how do we find them. So there was a lot of discussion on bundling and unbundling, and people only watching 70% of the box sets that they do during binge watching and things like that. Complaints, people can't find things online. Those types of topics were very intense in all the discussions, and again, trying to come up with different ways and different business models. Some of the complaints where people are saying, you know, people only watch 70% of the box set. Their feeling is it's because it's on another service, or they can't find it, or may have to pay for it. You know, they don't think, maybe they're just plain bored about it and don't want to watch it anymore.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny here, too, understanding and leading the consumer, the third bullet here. This is kind of a traditional broadcast mentality, I think. You know, we've got to understand that consumer so we can lead them to the programming. And I'm getting the sense that what's being missed is actually the consumer needs to lead the broadcasters where they want to go. And so retaining these eyeballs is now actually becoming a case of gaining eyeballs you don't presently have. And this, again, is the millennials and the younger generations that watch on multiple screens. And encouraging them to watch it all is an important thing. Also, yeah, a lot of negative talk in a couple of panels, one in particular about binge watching. Oh, these people who put them on and watch, you know, episode after episode, it's so hard. And I think to myself, you know, back in the day, that was the way you read a book. So, and by the way, you got to near the back of the book, you didn't like the book, you put it down, you didn't lose the box set. So these excuses, I think, are starting to get a little bit on the thin side.
Now, virtual reality, you know, it was certainly big. I'll cover a fair bit of that in the future zone. That was the main place where that was. Discussions whether or not it'll just be the next big thing or whether or not it'll be the 3D aspect. Believe it or not, there was actually some 3D in the future zone. So I'll cover that again. Internet of Things. you know, just basic discussions about TVs on refrigerators and stuff like that. Nothing, I didn't consider that special, did you?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I took a really negative view of this. I saw this as a bunch of old people making an excuse for why the damn kids should get off my lawn, basically. You know, is video coming to the refrigerator? Well, these are people who probably, you know, wouldn't think of looking up a recipe on an iPad in the kitchen. Can we now watch TV while driving our autonomous cars? I mean, you know, just I don't know. These sound like defensive questions of people losing their grip. Is cinema entering a new golden age? Now, that may be an interesting thing, though.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we went through the whole thing where cinema, you know, when TV came out, it moved from 4:3 out to wide aspect ratio and on and on and on. Is there catch-up? You know, the discussions were people still want to go out. There was Ang Lee gave a very good presentation, and you know, the theater was packed because people are interested in what's happening on the big screen.
Yeah, and he's embracing technology. He talked about actually learning from his kids about technology and embracing it more and more. And if you thought Life of Pi was exciting, he promises his next movie is even going to be more technologically exciting, I guess. And he's embracing high dynamic range, high frame rates, wide color gamut, and all of these new cinematic tools. So there may, in fact, be a new golden age of cinema coming in. It wasn't 3D, but it may be now.
The question comes up is, on the last point here, what is traditional broadcast anymore, or conventional television or whatever? And in a lot of places, people just refer to television, plain, it doesn't matter what it is, as broadcast anymore. Don't talk about new media so much, and that's the direction. If you take a look what happened in the Olympics viewing, Olympics certainly by NBC, or in the States with NBC, was way down. And then they started adding in what was the streaming amounts, and they were still down by 14% from London. But then again, it comes down, excuse me, to boredom and things like that. If we take a look at CBC stats, they were way up.
Yeah, and it's interesting what it says here. You know, millennials are predicted to watch 50% less conventional television by 2018. And actually, this isn't a frightening number when I consider my millennial and her friends, because they basically watch none of it now, so a 50% reduction really isn't material.
That's right. All right, well, why don't we get into some of the big announcements there, Paul?
Right. So there's been some acquisitions. Rovi, which is an organization, if you think all the way back, maybe some of you duplicated video cassettes back in the past. Statute of limitations has run out. We're all good. They were the Macrovision people. They acquired TiVo. And TiVo being a better name and a well-known name, they're now calling the whole organization TiVo. Blackmagic Design, the little Australian company who could, they bought both Ultimat, who's been around for decades, Petrov Lahus and his amazing keys, and also Fairlight, the digital synthesizer and audio workstation people. Both have been bought by Blackmagic. These are a smart bunch of guys. They just sit on their money and wait for companies to struggle, and then they swoop in and make a good deal. Ross Video, yeah, Canada, bought Covolos. Covolos is an IP company. They develop intellectual property for IP video and technologies related to that. They're based in Ottawa, so this gives Ross a big leg up in the IP market, one they'd sort of avoided for a while. And they also bought Abacus. Those who are in the history of still stores remember back in the day, and recording your computer animation frames to single frame at a time across the network to a device. It was probably an Abacus, like an A20. So they bought both of those. Cobalt bought Immediate TV. This is a compression company. It gives Cobalt an opportunity to play in the IP market. Telestream, of course, the video file conversion people, bought VidCheck, who are a file-based QA company. Google and Ericsson have announced a partnership. This will be a big partnership because they're both biggish companies, although I guess Ericsson's pretty puny compared to Google. And this is going to be a marriage, of course, of Google's Android TV and Ericsson's MediaFirst distribution system. Kaltura has kicked off a VR alliance. Everything in the world gets an alliance, and VR is not immune to this. So Inception, 24i, Encompass, and Harmonic have been initial founders of this, along with Kaltura. And this is going to become a forum where standardized VR for the broadcast and media industries can be developed. And the UHD Alliance, this was announced a few months ago, but oh yeah, that little eye chart for you on the wall there. They've announced the Phase A, trouble with UHD TV, of course, is a Swiss Army knife containing many sharp blades and pointy tools that no one's ever seen before. And so we have to kind of pare it down to a profile. Oh, God bless you for taking a photo of that slide. They've got to pare it down to something manageable, because if you want to say something meets some level of UHD that a consumer can recognize, you need to somehow bundle it. So they described a bundle, which they call Phase A, which is essentially 21p60 at 60 frames per second, and HDR and all that stuff. AES 67, if you ever want to feel old, you have a loudspeaker with an Ethernet connector on it. That pretty much says it all.
A little XLR3 pushy thing on it.
Yeah, an Ethernet connector and an XLR barrel. I mean, that's just, you know, nice ruggedized Ethernet
Nice to be
connector.
locked up there.
But yeah, monitor speakers powered by power over Ethernet. You just plug them into the Ethernet jack, plug them into the switch, and away they go. So AES 67 is now everywhere. The standard was released a couple of years ago now, and it's been widely adopted, widely deployed, and there are just literally a ton of vendors on the floor now at IBC and the other shows showing AES 67 hardware. And it's in intercoms, it's in audio panels, it's in recorders, it's in speakers. We'll talk a little bit about this tonight, the live IP infrastructure thing. We've been talking about the IT and IP move for a very long time. But the real, and we've had, we've been doing IT and IP for a great long while with file-based workflows. And really the whole grail in this thing is live infrastructures, low latency equivalent to SDI live system building infrastructure tools with IP. And so it's been talked about everywhere on the floor. Everybody's talking IP. Oh, they all have a sign up. They all belong to the AIMS Alliance, and this is all good. The reality of stuff is a little different. So the SMPTE 2022-6 standard, which is essentially SDI over IP, has been released a couple of years ago, and we're seeing that now hitting the market. A number of vendors have this, and in fact, the VRT from Belgium had their live studio project at the show, and it's pretty cool, and I think we have something a little later on that. The real cool stuff, however, which is the studio video over IP work being done by the Video Services Forum and SMPTE. While vendors are all promising they'll be there when the standard gets there, which is currently forecast for 2018. That work is underway. The distinction here is that it's not SDI over IP, it's actually discrete streams of video and audio and metadata over IP, which allows you then to move stuff around on the network where you need it. You don't have to demux the audio, for example, to send it somewhere else. So it's based on something called NMOS, which is the Discovery Registration Service, PTP for synchronization and audio-video transport. And we, in fact, had a demo of all three of these technologies. I think we have a photo here somewhere later, don't we?
I got a video.
Oh, we even got a video. So there
I
you
have
go.
no voice, I do videos.
Stan has videos. So anyway, the stuff is coming. It is real. The demo was highly successful. I had some involvement with that. Lee in the room here had some involvement in that, and we were very, very pleased that it all worked out. The interest level was very high. I'd have to say it was one of the big hits of the show because everybody's been waiting for this stuff to
Well, why don't we stop and show the video now?
Do you want to show the video?
Why don't we do that?
Let's do the video.
Let's do that. So I snuck in before the show and had a good look at the setup, and I thought everybody might want to have a see that. I'm here with Jack at IBC, and we're looking at the IBC interop zone here, and it's being put together. You know, it looks like a nightmare. Of course, it's the day before IBC, but tell me, this is a lot like went on in Houston?
Absolutely. We spent a whole entire week in Houston setting this all up, pre-preparing for it, putting all the demos together for the transport area, for the timing, PPP timing, and the discovery and registration section that is here.
I think having 3 different sections are excellent because people need to understand all the different aspects of IP.
That's correct, and we tied them all together, making it work like it would in a real network.
Well, Jack, we certainly can see a lot of people working on this in the background here. And you know, it's all IP, but we got fiber bits happening and Ethernet bits.
And timing, and discovery and registration kind of things. So there's all kinds of things that are happening here, all in synchronization with it.
Well, I really hope this is a learning experience for both sides because you're going to have a lot of customers coming in asking what it's about as well as feedback and what they think about it.
Absolutely. This is in order to try to unify the entire industry. It really helped drive many of these companies to get their technologies out sooner, having this kind of interop and having to demonstrate it here A lot of these companies probably wouldn't have been ready this quickly had we not done this. So this really is driving the whole standard, driving the industry toward a unified solution.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic, and thanks again, Jack.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Lee, and thank you, Paul, for
You're welcome.
photobombing my video there.
Video, that was great.
That's very kind of you.
So Jack was actually right. We had a lot of customers come through. I mean, we had a load of customers come through. The thing was packed most of the time. We also had a lot of vendors come through, vendors who had participated at that point going, oh, hey, what's going on here? So I think we're probably going to see
Yeah, it was,
more
it was
participation.
actually all I could do to, I had to squeeze in sessions after the show had closed because the place was packed so much, and then a little bit on the last day.
At IBC 2016, the Interop Zone was a joint effort between a lot of groups, and it was brought to IBC by both IABM and AIMS. And as you can see, there were over 30 plus vendors that were put together. Behind me here, we also had in the Interop Zone, we had the studio that's actually feeding IBC TV, and it's all done with IP. And that's a joint effort with VRT EBU for live IP. And then if we take a look around the side here, you can see the production area where the switching is done, and the technical director, etc. And then over here on this side of the booth, we have the zone set up where we have a discovery and registration zone, PTP timing, as well as IP transport. Alex, you're looking after the IP transport area of the Interop demo here at IBC, and just tell me what people mean by IP transport.
Here we're looking at uncompressed, in-facility, and studio applications over IP.
So this is based on, is this standardized at this point, or how does that work?
We're showing SMPTE 2022-6, which is standardized, and technical recommendations TR03 and TR04, which are the basis for SMPTE 21-10.
So the point of this is really to show how IP transport is interoping between all sorts of different vendors. So you've got a huge rack here. Is it mainly baseband stuff? Does it all go through an IP switch? How does that work?
There's an IP switch at the core of it, and various receivers are subscribing to the various transmitters. There's some selected pairings indicated below the displays.
So on the monitor here we've got 2022-6, and how does that work? All the manufacturers are working together. What does that mean when it says embryonic into harmonic?
The manufacturer on the left is the transmitter. The manufacturer on the right is the receiver that's subscribed to that stream through the switch using IGMP.
Okay, so it's totally glitch-free. Obviously, some of them are a little bit delayed more than the others, but really, really minor. And here on the next monitor, we're showing TR03, and again, it's the same thing.
Yes, transmitters and subscribed receivers. The difference with TR03 is that the video essence and the audio essence and the ancillary essence are separated and transmitted over separate streams for studio applications. So if you'd like to go with the audio to a switch, mixing panel, for example, you can do that independently of the video, and afterwards they can be recombined, and there's provisions for retiming the lip sync using precision time protocol.
Paul, you're here helping describe the, call it the timing area, or the PTP area. So this is really ultimately the end game of a blackburst replacement when we go IP 100%.
It is, and it's more than that, because it's exactly the same IP network that is carrying all of the essence around that is also doing the locking. So you do away with quite a lot of cabling as well.
Well, that's cool, and we don't have a separate blackburst. Now, what happens if we do need blackburst?
Oh, it is possible to integrate legacy methods with IP methods. There are quite a lot of boxes that translate between the two environments.
Now, this is a super important aspect, of course, when we get to IP. So just generally here, what do you have at the Interop display?
On this part of it, we're showing that it's possible to replace the old Black and Bus changeover arrangements that you always have to have, so there's no single point of failure. With two grandmasters sitting on the same network, so that they're the timing masters and they are putting out their signals, and slaves are deciding, according to the quality that they actually announce they have, they're deciding which of the two grandmasters to lock to, and should one go away or degrade its quality, it will then go away and lock to the other one.
Now, one last question. With Genlock, we were kind of used to dealing with vectors and getting it down into a few degrees. So what does that turn into when we're going IP?
Well, now that buffering is a necessity with any data network, you can relax the limits. You're not looking to sub-nanosecond. Okay, so you see up here we have a sub-microsecond precision, 200 nanoseconds of division, but we typically say 1 microsecond to make it easy, taking into account the buffers that people always implement.
Alex, you're looking after the discovery and registration side of this, and most people, when they think of IP, they just think of transport. So what does this mean?
Yeah, that's right. So discovery and registration is a really important part of our future IP broadcast systems. If you think about the idea of virtualizing broadcast systems, then it becomes really, really important to be able to know what is running in your broadcast plant at any one time. And ABWA's ISO4 NMOS system enables us to very easily show you everything that you've got on one screen.
All right, so just hang on. NMOS, ISO4, meaning?
Sure. So NMOS stands for Network Media Open Specifications. And basically what that means is we've got a family of specifications being produced by a working group in the AMWA who are working to add metadata and APIs on top of the transport layer that have already come from people like the Video Services Forum.
So previously, if I had a camera I needed to throw on quickly as an extra beauty shot or something, I just put it into the SDI port on the router. So what does that mean now?
Yeah, so that's exactly what you would have done previously. Now, of course, the problem that you've got with IP interconnections is that you might only have one network port on the back of your piece of equipment. So previously you might have had different sockets for all kinds of different signals, and it would have been very obvious what signals your camera could produce and what cables you could connect or had connected to each one. Now, on IP, maybe that camera does have that one network socket and that's it. So with AMWA's ISO4 NMOS, Discovery and Registration System, we are able to, using an API, list all of the different ways you can connect to a device on the network, all of the different kinds of audio, all of the different kinds of video that it produces.
So that means ultimately this is more flexible than SDI.
Oh, definitely. It really, really does. And it means that you won't have to spend time in the future working out what you've plugged in, what port you've plugged it into, because that doesn't really matter very much anymore. It's very easy to build an application that will give you a view of everything you plugged in and enable you to manage it from one place.
So what are we looking at over here?
So this is a Grass Valley multi-viewer, and they have implemented the NMOS APIs. So what we're seeing here is uncompressed video, which is being carried according to TR03, coming into the multi-viewer, and as you can see, it's being displayed. But importantly, we can discover that the multi-viewer exists. We can show it on a screen as a multi-viewer capability in our broadcast plant, and we can actually control what each of the segments, each of the quadrants in the multi-viewer is showing.
I guess that's the cool part, because before, ultimately, you never had any feedback that the multi-viewer was there. So ultimately, with IP, it's bi-directional.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important things that IP brings. Suddenly you have the ability for every device on your network to actually tell you something about itself, and that starts with telling you that it actually exists.
Really cool stuff. Thanks, Alec.
No problem.
NASA stuff. So
that was all big. The IP stuff was all really big at the show. UHD TV, of course, was everywhere. And it was everywhere, and it was everywhere, and everybody had something. And of course, we now this year are seeing displays and cameras and lenses, all manner of signal processing and production workflow tools available either in UHD today or coming real soon. 12 gigabit SDI was widely shown. Looks like 12 gig SDI is not the end of SDI quite yet.
Well, I think there's a, a few reasons for that. Ultimately, it's plug and play. People are used to it. But also, I was in Korea a few months ago, and they had mandated that everybody has, all the broadcasters have to be running UHD by February next year. And they tried some IP stuff. It wasn't ready. They have to be on air now, so they've moved right to 12 gigs.
Yep. So, and there's a little gap in the IP world, and that comes around the fact that most, the commodity speed for IP interfaces right now, the sweet spot is 10 gigabit fiber, which doesn't exactly fit a 12 gigabit UHD signal, so you need mezzanine compression or something. So SDI, in fact, is living on quite successfully on coax and on fiber at 12 gigabits. The big buzz, however, in UHD is high dynamic range, and we're seeing at the show all sorts of HDR and SDR combination workflows to get to and from each to the other, conversion, and some HDR monitors and cameras as well.
Yeah, Dolby had a great demonstration. They had in one of their darkened rooms there, so you could really see it. But they were showing, had bought 2 new Grass Valley cameras. And the Grass Valley camera, if you're not familiar with it, it has obviously a 4K mode for doing UHD, but it also has a native 1080 mode as well. And so what they had done was they had shot it in SDR, or standard dynamic range with HD color, and then they shot it as well in HDR with wider color gamut, and then down converted it essentially into a standard dynamic range. And amazingly enough, you had more color, you had more range in there. And I guess they could fiddle with each shot a little bit, but they did have some automated software that did that. And it just showed you if you did shoot in UHD as native, even though you were down converting to SDR, you could get a lot better picture.
There were some new products, or there were a fair number of new products actually, but a few that caught my eye. NHK was showing you 1 millimeter thick 8K display. It actually consisted of 4 1 millimeter thick 4K displays, but just the fact that these things are a millimeter thick was kind of stunning. They're OLED panels. They were brilliant. They looked really, really good. Panasonic and others had UHD cameras. Panasonic's goes up to 240 frames per second with UHD resolution and high dynamic range, so that's a pretty exciting camera. Both Matrox and Bluefish are offering network interface cards to go in a workstation computer to accommodate live IP. So these cards not only have the bandwidth and the NICs on them for the network interface, they have some video processing gate space and code space as well. So these people are obviously aiming at aftermarket application vendors who aren't in the hardware business and simply want to connect to the infrastructure but write software applications. Tech was there, of course, with their usual cool stuff. There's Sylvia. The WFM 2200 is really cool. It's a sort of a portable-ish handheld thing I thought was really quite sexy. But their Prism touchscreen waveform monitor was really stunning. Everybody's got to get a demo of a Prism waveform monitor. Sylvia's sitting up there. 5 points for me on every sale tonight. And the EBU is sponsoring development of open source applications. And we'll talk a little bit more about software development here at some point, I think. But the whole top-down world of design engineering is being turned upside down in broadcasting because this idea of getting to market with some code ASAP under agile development techniques and using open source and collaborative tools is really changing the world. So we're seeing a lot of change, and the EBU is getting behind a lot of that.
You know, I did a panel on IP with a combination of, let's call it Dell EMC, yes, as it's now known, as well as Grass. And it was with some Australian broadcasters that do IP. And one mentioned, don't mention the word DevOps while we have our panel. And the other one said, oh, yes, without DevOps, we couldn't move that fast. So it just shows you how important development tools are.
Oh, exactly. Lots of other things there in the new product department. Quickly, lots of software compression tools. Everybody, their brother seems to have a software compression tool or some little widget they're selling. EBU has updated the R103 document. This is a recommendation around defining gamut, and they're going to be adding high dynamic range and wide color gamut to that soon, although there is an update published on the EBU website. Lynx, funny little company, makes funny little colored things. Have a box called the Green Machine. which is an open hardware and software platform. So they're basically putting the big FPGA and the big CPU in a little box and selling it for applications yet to be determined. DeltaCast is selling a video compression, video management software development kit, which is kind of interesting. So people here now selling actually tools to build broadcast and production and creative tools with, which is pretty neat. Omnitech is into UHD TV. Of course, everybody probably knows about Omnitech. They're sort of a specialty test equipment manufacturing company, and so they have the UHD product now supporting their waveform monitor. Anton Bauer has an interesting thing. Everybody put up your hand if you have a telephone that catches fire made by Samsung. Everybody's worried about lithium-ion batteries. Anton Bauer's charger now actually has a travel discharge function, so if you're going to travel your batteries, you can take them down to a safe, documented level for safe travel.
Yeah, actually last year they came out with a fireproof case, so I guess they're really being sure.
You know, you don't want your name on the battery that takes the plane out of the sky, right? I think it's general rule. And finally, Axon, after several years of saying SDI is dead, which was sort of the right way to go, but AVB is going to be the answer. That's the audio-video bridging standard. It turns out that AVB is not going to be the answer. It will be IP, and so they finally this year stopped trying to flog AVB. And then there was a panel to choose the actual leaders in the IP space this year, and these are the winners. Embryonics Arista. Arista is a switch company, not really in the broadcast industry, but you'll hear more of their name because they've taken a great interest in this. Panasonic, Suitcase TV are people working on the NMOS stuff. Evertz and Imagine. And one of the IP leaders was this IP zone, the interoperability and demo zone we had. And this is about Agile. And this was talked about in several places because, again, especially in standards development, we do it top-down. We figure everything out, and we document it all, and we get it all just tickety-boo, and then we release the standard 5 years later. And that's why we've often been known as the society of many people talking endlessly. And it's been a problem for SMPTE, and we need to speed things up because the world goes fast. And this Agile development process, which many of you are familiar with, and those who aren't should probably Google it. I'm not going to read you these bullets. This is becoming more and more the way things are getting done. Write some code, give it a try. If it doesn't work 100% right, that's okay. Measure what did work right and fix what didn't work right and just keep on going. And just don't wait. And content everywhere. Content is king, right? Live over the top is a hot topic. This is the grail for broadcasters. How do they get their live content on over-the-top platforms where they can capture the younger audience? Millennials and their VOD and their SVOD, over-the-air, and anything cast is just foreign to millennials. If it's broadcast, if it's simulcast, if it's whatever cast, they don't want to know about it, and they're the future market. Behavior modeling and behavior prediction of millennials is very hard for broadcasters because they just don't know what to expect. They have an audience here that doesn't sit in the easy chair and just, you know, eat the pablum. And so this is a whole new way to model TV viewing, and they're trying to learn about how this works. How is content viewed? What's the socialization aspect of content? Millennials watch together while being physically separate, but they're in touch by chatting online and so on, right? So there's funny consumption habits. And the future behavior is unknown. Will they be like their parents? I mean, the parents of millennials, which I guess is us, and I'm probably a bad example, but we apparently watch TV by schedule. I know my parents did, and my mother-in-law does. I don't. But will these people become like we've all used to be or are today, perhaps watching TV by appointment? Remains to be seen. So content is king, and how to get it into the eyes of the viewer is the challenge. And then one last cool thing. This has been around a couple of years, but it was being demoed this year. It works really, really well. And
how do you know?
Because I saw it.
How do you know it was working?
Oh, because a deaf person beside me was saying,
okay, all right, fair enough.
It takes closed captioning. It drives a little computer graphic avatar that does sign language.
Yeah.
So you can position this up on your smart TV up in the corner of the screen, and the closed captioning will just be turned into sign language for hearing impaired listeners. Well, I guess they wouldn't be hearing impaired listeners at that point, would they? Anyway, very cool, quite neat, and this will probably be an app you can load into your smart TV before too very long. It just works with standard caption text streams. And motion tracking everywhere was motion tracking. It continues, and it just keeps getting better all the time. And SDI must die and hardware is dead. These were common themes around the show, but very far from.
They just keep reusing that sign for the last 4 years.
That one SDI must die sign.
That's right.
Interesting coming from a company who builds neither hardware nor SDI, but I still don't get that. And the interop zone, Stan, this is where you picked it up. There's the timing rack, so exciting. You can see these were real geeky demos. We've got waveform monitors, we got scopes with waveforms on them. the whole 9 yards. This was very definitely something that was meant for the techie in the crowd. And then we had all the pretty screens as well. Was that on this slide there? The screens on the right, over beside Alex. And that was, you know, they played that down a little bit in Stan's video. That is actually pretty exciting because basically everybody who participated in that took the draft standards and went into their labs and implemented. And then we all got together and plugged the stuff together to see what worked, and most of it pretty much worked. So those pictures you see are coming from a transmitter built by person A and a receiver built by person B. They've never met. It's like a blind date. They plugged it together and it worked out. So it's proof of the technology, it's proof of the standard, and it's proof that this stuff actually has a future, perhaps. And there's the participants. Oh, you already had a better shot of that anyway. Future zone, Stan.
Sure, let's have a look at the future zone. They have this dark, dark, long hall with the future zone.
It's dark.
And I didn't bother doing a picture of this, but they had a 10,000 nit TV set there. It was so bright, I was videoing the guy that put together the future zone, and it was so dark I didn't have any room, so I put him beside the 10,000 nit TV set there. But again, just too bright. As Paul mentioned, this thin set, and if you can see there, it's thin. Actually, it's 2 millimeter, not 1.
Well, that includes the bezel and case.
That's right. But it is thin. Look at that. Incredible. So just if you want to see the stats there, you can see it was a bunch of panels putting together a 130-inch set.
And their plan, by the way, is that it rolls down on a roller like a shade, and then you can roll it back up when you're done. So that's actually their plan for the technology.
Yeah. And this was a cool little thing. My video got messed up here with the wrong video. But anyway, there was a 3D television. I'll show you that video in a minute. We'll get that. They had this stage here. I didn't really quite understand it. They called it immersive public viewing, and there was a lot of VR stuff going on in it, and holography and things like that. So it's a wide stage, and then you can see some holographic images closer into the people there. As you can see this, you can see the no photography sign there, but I guess I just didn't notice that when I took the shot. I guess I was shooting video, not photography. That's different.
Must be it. Yeah.
That's right. Anyway, as we mentioned, VR was around. Nokia really got big into VR with their Ozo, and they've come up with this this device here, this camera that they milled it out and made sure everything was accurate down to the micron, because they claim camera placement has to be down to the micron level or it won't work, and it does. Anyway, John Ive, who gave it a try here, he usually gets sick. Last year when we did the VR stuff, he almost got sick watching a wrestling match and a circus there, and he was really impressed with how well it worked. A lot of stuff going on with 3D audio. Obviously, in order to have VR working, you have to have 3D audio. And yeah, you're still just putting on a headset there, but you have to certainly know where it's coming from. So this is these people were pushing the first standard in that. Sennheiser here, a 3D or a VR microphone rather, and John was listening. They had a white noise generator, and they'd move it around the microphone so you could see it working there. And I did a little shot here. You can see, I asked him to unscrew the lid so I could have a little closer look at it. I'll see if I can show you that one again here. Maybe I can't. Love PowerPoint. There we go. Anyway, it really, really did work well. You could hear the white noise generator go completely around your head. And you have to have a roller coaster if you're going to be in the future zone. Again, too much VR from my point of view, but that's the way it goes.
Okay, so this is the Sphericam. It's a 360 camera, fully spherical, no holes. You see up, down, all around you. It's one camera with 6 lenses, 6 sensors, but completely gen-locked, synchronized. It has 4 internal microphones, internal storage, and internal battery, so you can be completely self-sufficient for about an hour. It also does its own stitching inside the camera unit, so you don't have to. It takes away the post-production hassle, and it's extremely sturdy and intended for non-studio use cases. It's encased in solid aluminum and never overheats.
There you go, the competition to Nokia. It doesn't look as sexy, though, as the other one, but what can you say? And, of course, we had to have something on ATSC3. A Korean company was showing their modulator there and how they were doing HDR and the different constellation patterns. And Paul needed a remote.
If you need a remote, this is the place to go, is this guy's booth. That was just one wall. He had walls and walls of remotes. Just in case you think they came from more than one company.
Walls and walls are remote. So one thing I will just show you here, one of the things that people do complain about is the speed of standards. And as Paul mentioned, there's a lot of changes coming. But I managed to grab Peter Symes, and I'll just show you this video before we finish up.
I'm here with Peter Symes, and Peter, you're the big cheese on the technical side at SMPTE. What's your title?
I'm the Director of Standards and Engineering, but the outgoing big cheese.
The outgoing, well, that's why I wanted to talk to you today, because, I mean, certainly I've been involved with SMPTE for years, but you've been heavily into the standard side. And what's it like really on the inside there? How much is politics and how much is real standard stuff?
There's a lot of each, perhaps too much of the former and sometimes not enough of the latter, but in a way politics is an essential part of what goes on. And what we're looking at is how do you come up with standards that overall are of the greatest benefit to the industry. And obviously different people, different organizations have different agendas, different priorities. And it's, you know, although the outcome is a technical one, part of getting there is inevitably a political process as well, because you're trying to find something that satisfies as many people as possible, as much as possible.
I think you've always done a great job of doing a fine line in between the two, and that's worked out pretty good over the years.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's always a challenge because you have to deal with the situation that some organizations and some industry sectors are better represented than others. And you have to make sure that the minority voices get heard. And sometimes those are really, really important voices into what the eventual standard should be.
I'm going to ask you one last question here, and that's speed. People always complain standards take too long, but you have to be practical. Now, certainly, I've seen things are popping out a lot faster than before, but what's the real skinny on it?
Well, the real skinny is that intrinsically a new process is somewhat slow, because you have to deal with everyone's comments and objections, and sometimes those can take a while to get round. I think what we have done, and we are continuing to do at the moment, and Howard Luck is taking over from me, is very much a part of this, and we're working very closely together. But what we've got to do, and we've done a lot of up to now, is minimizing the ability of people to delay the process when they don't want it to happen. And that's an unfortunate political aspect of sometimes what goes on sometimes in standards. And you know, you can't take away and shouldn't take away the right for everyone to be heard and for their objections to be talked about and this sort of thing, but you can and should take away the ability of these people to game the system and make it take a lot longer than it should because they don't particularly like what's going on. I think we've made a lot of progress there.
There is no question some people do delay it just because their products aren't ready or whatever reason. Anyway, with that, Peter, I'd like to thank you for your years of service, and I wish you well with your retirement.
Thank you very much. Great to see you, Stan.
Go ahead. Talk about NASA.
Well,
we had a message from space.
We had a message from space, and that was kind of cool, and part of that was because of an IBC award.
Hello to everyone in Amsterdam. I'm NASA astronaut Kate Rubin, Expedition 49 flight engineer aboard the International Space Station. Living and working here in weightlessness 250 miles above our beautiful planet, we're lucky enough to enjoy stunning views of the world below from a unique perspective. We are honored to bring this fresh perspective to our fellow humans through the images and video we collect. From here, we see unity, not divisions. From the beginning, NASA has worked to share the wonders of exploration and scientific research through films and television programs. On behalf of everyone involved, we thank the IBC for its kind recognition of our efforts to show what we're doing off the Earth for the Earth. All the best to you from the crew of Expedition 49 aboard the International Space Station.
There we go. Well, we're done.
There you go.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Stan. Any questions?